Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was born on April 19, 1939, in Mashhad, one of the holiest cities in Iran and a center of Shiite scholarship. He was born into a modest but deeply religious family. His father was a respected cleric, and their household was shaped by discipline, faith, and intellectual devotion. From an early age, Khamenei was immersed in religious education. While many children his age were focused on ordinary childhood routines, he was studying Arabic grammar, Islamic jurisprudence, and the foundations of Shiite theology. Those early years formed the spiritual backbone of the man who would one day lead the Islamic Republic for more than 3 decades. As a young seminarian, he continued his studies in Qom, the epicenter of Shiite religious authority in Iran. There, he encountered influential scholars and revolutionary ideas that were beginning to circulate among clerics dissatisfied with the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The Shah's regime promoted modernization, Western alliances, and secular governance. While some sectors of society welcomed these changes, many religious leaders viewed them as a direct threat to Islamic values and Iranian sovereignty. Among those increasingly drawn into political activism was Ali Khamenei. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Khamenei aligned himself with the teachings of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who had emerged as the most vocal critic of the Shah. Khamenei began delivering speeches criticizing the monarchy and what he described as foreign domination of Iran's political and cultural life. His activism led to repeated arrests. He was interrogated, detained, and imprisoned by the Shah's security forces. These experiences shaped his worldview profoundly. He came to see political struggle not merely as a contest for power, but as a religious duty, a defense of faith against oppression and external control. The revolution of 1979 changed everything. After months of mass protests and civil unrest, the Shah fled Iran, and Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile to establish the Islamic Republic. The new government fused religious authority with political power, placing clerics at the helm of the state. Khamenei, having proven his loyalty and commitment during the revolutionary years, quickly assumed significant responsibilities in the new system. He became part of the inner circle of leadership that sought to institutionalize the revolution's ideals. In 1981, during a volatile period marked by internal conflict and political assassinations, Khamenei survived a bombing that severely injured his right arm. The attack left him permanently disabled, but it also elevated his stature among supporters. He was seen as a survivor of the revolution's early dangers, a man who had literally carried its wounds. Later that same year, he was elected president of Iran at the age of 42. His presidency unfolded during the darkest days of the Iran-Iraq War. The conflict, which began in 1980, was one of the longest and bloodiest wars of the late 20th century. Cities were bombed, soldiers fought in grueling trench warfare, and chemical weapons were deployed. As president, Khamenei supported strategies centered on resilience and ideological unity. The war fostered a sense of national solidarity, but also entrenched militarization and centralized authority. By the time the conflict ended in 1988, Iran was exhausted, yet politically consolidated under revolutionary leadership. In 1989, following the death of Ayatollah Khomeini, the Islamic Republic faced a pivotal moment. Khomeini had been the revolution's founding figure, charismatic, authoritative, and widely revered among his followers. Choosing a successor was a delicate and consequential decision. Despite not being the highest-ranking cleric in formal religious hierarchy, Ali Khamenei was selected by the Assembly of Experts to become supreme leader. Constitutional changes allowed him to assume the role, transforming him from president into the ultimate authority of the Iranian state. As supreme leader, Khamenei became commander-in-chief of the armed forces and gained oversight over the judiciary, intelligence services, and state broadcasting. He possessed the power to appoint or dismiss key officials and to set the strategic direction of the country. Over time, his office became the central pillar of Iran's political system. Presidents came and went, but Khamenei remained the steady, dominant force behind national policy. Under his leadership, Iran expanded its regional footprint. The country developed alliances and partnerships across the Middle East, supporting movements and governments aligned with its strategic interests. Iran became deeply involved in regional conflicts, particularly in Iraq and Syria. Supporters argued that this approach protected Iran by pushing potential threats beyond its borders. Critics argued that it intensified instability and drained national resources. The nuclear program became one of the defining issues of his rule. Khamenei consistently maintained that Iran's nuclear activities were peaceful and aimed at energy independence and scientific progress. Western governments, however, suspected potential military ambitions. Years of negotiations, sanctions, and diplomatic standoffs followed. The 2015 nuclear agreement temporarily eased tensions and lifted some sanctions, but the U.S. withdrawal from the deal in 2018 reignited economic pressure. Sanctions severely impacted Iran's currency, trade, and daily life for millions of citizens. Domestically, Khamenei promoted a philosophy he called the resistance economy, emphasizing self-reliance and internal production as shields against sanctions. He portrayed economic hardship as a test of national will. For many Iranians, however, rising inflation and unemployment created frustration. Public discontent periodically erupted into protests. The 2009 presidential election sparked the Green Movement, with demonstrators accusing authorities of manipulating results. The government responded decisively, and Khamenei publicly endorsed the official outcome, framing protests as foreign interference. In 2022, protests erupted again following the death of Mahsa Amini, drawing attention to social restrictions and women's rights. The demonstrations spread across cities, revealing deep generational divides. The state's response reignited international criticism and intensified debates about reform and authority. Khamenei's rhetoric remained firm throughout his tenure. He frequently condemned U.S. and Israeli policies, presenting Iran as a nation standing firm against global pressure. To supporters, he symbolized resilience and ideological clarity. To critics, he represented inflexibility and authoritarian control, yet even his critics acknowledged his political endurance. For more than 35 years, he remained at the center of power, navigating wars, sanctions, diplomatic breakthroughs, and domestic unrest. Then, in late February 2026, history took a dramatic turn. Amid escalating regional tensions and military confrontation, coordinated airstrikes targeted key sites within Iran. Among those locations were facilities closely tied to senior leadership. In the aftermath, Iranian authorities confirmed that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had been killed. The announcement reverberated across the Middle East and beyond. The man who had led Iran since 1989, longer than many world leaders remain in office, was gone. His death triggered a profound moment of transition. The nation entered a period of mourning, and constitutional mechanisms were activated to manage succession. Political factions maneuvered quietly behind the scenes. Across the region, allies and adversaries alike recalculated their positions. Markets reacted, diplomats scrambled, and analysts debated the implications for regional stability. Ali Khamenei's life spanned revolution, war, consolidation, and confrontation. He rose from a modest clerical household to become one of the most powerful figures in the modern Middle East. To some, he was a steadfast guardian of sovereignty and Islamic identity. To others, he was an authoritarian ruler whose policies limited freedoms and prolonged confrontation with global powers. His legacy is layered, complex, and inseparable from the story of the Islamic Republic itself. Whether remembered as a defender of revolution or as a symbol of centralized authority, his influence on Iran's political system and on the geopolitics of the region will be studied for generations. His era marked a defining chapter in Middle Eastern history, one that ended not quietly, but amid the thunder of conflict and the uncertainty of what would come next.